Assalamu alaikum students. In this lesson, I will discuss about sexual reproduction in flowering plants. We know that in angiosperms, parent plant is diploid sporophyte generation, which means there is spore producing generation. So flower is the reproductive structure in this generation. The flower components are arranged in the form of whorls. The outer two whorls in a flower are the non-reproductive whorls, while the inner two whorls are the reproductive whorls. So these are reproductive whorls. Calyx is the outermost whorl. It is usually green in color. Its individual units, leaflets, are called sepals. So these are all sepals, but individual one will be calyx. The individual one will be calyx, and all these green leaflets are sepals. These sepals protect the inner whorls at the bud stage. So here is bud stage, which is an unopened flower. Next one is corolla, which is the next inner whorl, and it is often colored brightly. Its individual units, leaflets, are called petals. These petals are brightly colored, and these petals serve to attract bees, birds, which are the agents of pollination. Just have a close look at the petals, which are brightly colored. The third whorl is androecium, which is the male reproductive part of flower. So here you are watching, these white parts are the male reproductive parts of this flower. Its units are called stamens. Each stamen has a thread-like filament at the free end of which anther is attached. Now I am showing you a filament and anther. These are anthers, and this stalk is filament. Anther has pollen sacs in which haploid microspores, which are pollen grains, are produced through meiosis. Are you able to observe the pollen grains which are scattered on the surface of these petals? Each microspore germinates into the male gametophyte generation. During it, the nucleus of microspore undergoes mitosis and produces two nuclei, tube nucleus and a generative nucleus. The generative nucleus again undergoes mitosis and produces two sperms. So a germinated microscope has a tube nucleus and two sperms. All these structures are the male gametophyte generation of the plant. These were male reproductive parts, which are also known as androecium. Are you able to observe the anthers in which pollen grains are present? These are the anthers and the male reproductive parts of rose. This is the androecium. Its units are called stamens, and each stamen has a thread-like filament on which anther is present, and in anther there are pollen grains, which are microspores. In this flower internal structure, these are the male reproductive parts, which are also known as androecium, and the pollen grains are sticking with my skin. This is the female reproductive part, which is also known as gynoecium. Its units are called carpels, while androecium's units are stamens. They are also known as carpels or pistils. Each carpel is made up of basal ovary. So here is ovary. This part is ovary. This part, or you can say neck of this ovary, is known as style, and this part, which is the topmost part, is known as stigma, and it is sticky. This part is sticky because for the attachment of pollen grains on this part. I have discussed about stigma, style and ovary. Inside ovary, there are many ovules. Inside each ovule, one haploid macrospore is produced through meiosis. This macrospore will germinate into the female gametophyte generation. During it, macrospore undergoes mitosis and produce an egg cell and some associated structures, for example, fusion nucleus. Egg cell and associated structures are the female gametophyte generation of plants. When pollen will transfer at this part, which is stigma of this ovary, it will make a pollen tube, and this pollen tube will extend to this part. Different flowers have one to many carpels. These may either be fused or free. Theophrastus, the successor of Aristotle, was a Greek philosopher. He laid a solid foundation of botany, including the morphology and functions of the flowers. He recognized the male and female sex parts of the flowers and described the pollination and fertilization in flowers. This flower is actually a condensed shoot with the nodes present very close to each other. The different parts of the flower are attached to the nodes. All the structures present in one node are collectively called whorl. So here is a whorl, and here are the whorls of this rose. I have discussed about structure of a flower, which includes petal. Stamen includes anther, filament and sepal. Stigma is here, style is here, ovary, ovule, and this part is collectively called carpel. When pollen grains mature, they are transferred to stigma and it is called pollination. So here is a pollen tube that forms when pollen grains land on the stigma of the ovary. Here is ovary, here is anther. So microspore mother cells have diploid cells. Then there would be meiosis in microspores. Then there would be one N. 2N will be reduced to 1N. Then there would be the pollen grains, which have generative nucleus and tube nucleus. When these pollen grains land on the surface of stigma, they form a pollen tube, and these pollen grains have sperms and a tube nucleus. Here are the macrospores, mother cells, and here is diploid. Mother cells have 2N, and there would be meiosis in macrospore. Then the number 2N will be reduced to 1N, and there would be repeated mitosis, and then there would be female gametophyte having 1N. This pollen tube will grow through style, ovary and enter into this ovule. Here it bursts and releases the sperms. Both sperms enter the female gametophyte. One sperm will fuse with this egg and form a diploid zygote. The other sperm will fuse with this fusion nucleus, and it has 1N plus 1N and forms a 3N endosperm nucleus. Since this process involves two fusions, so here are two fusions, it means that there would be double fertilization. This zygote will develop into embryo, and endosperm nucleus will develop into endosperm tissue, which is the food for growing embryo. This ovule then becomes a seed, and ovary changes into the fruit. When seeds mature, they are dispersed. We shall discuss in the next section. If seeds get suitable conditions, their embryos develop into new plants, which is the diploid sporophyte of the next generation. The male gametophyte in this figure is the anther, which consists of microspore mother cells with 2N. Then there would be meiosis and microspores would be 1N. Microspores have two nucleus, generative nucleus and tube nucleus. Here are pollen tube, sperms and tube nucleus. When these spores will land on stigma, then they will form a pollen tube, which then extends from style to ovary and then to the ovule. Macrospores, mother cells with 2N, then there would be meiosis, and microspores with 1N. Then there would be mitosis, and female gametophyte has 1N. Then there would be fusion, and 1N of egg will fuse with 1N of sperm, and then it will form zygote, and fusion nucleus will produce endosperm. This zygote will develop into embryo with 2N, and this endosperm nucleus will develop into endosperm tissue. This ovule then change into seed, and this ovary will change into fruit. Same in the case of this chili plant, and you are able to observe the anthers and this pollen tube. When it will pollinate, then ovary of this plant will change into this fruit, and ovule will change into this seed. Same in the case of this tomato flower. When there will be double fertilization, then ovary will change into these fruits, and ovule will change into these seeds. Ovary will develop into this fruit, and ovule will develop into these seeds. So that was all about the male and female reproductive parts and pollination and development of fruits. Thank you and have a nice day.